The Ashford garden had been rearranged to look like a magazine cover. Pale pink balloons drifted against a sky so blue it felt artificial, and a floral wall hydrangeas and peonies crammed together like the world's most expensive secret rose behind a tower of champagne coupes. The band under the tent played something jaunty and forgettable. Waiters slid between hedges with the calm of swans. The guests were beautiful, in the way money is beautiful, when it believes itself invisible. Somewhere inside the decor was a little girl in a dress that had cost more than sleep. Her name, Lila, glittered in gold cursive across the top tier of a cake so tall a ladder might have been part of the recipe. She sat on the bottom step of the terrace, her knees making small tents beneath the tulle, a doll tucked into the crook of her elbow like a smuggled secret. The doll did not match the party. The doll did not match anything. That was partly why she liked it. Lila's father, Edward Hammond, stood near the bar with two men whose suits fit like well-kept lies. "Texas," one of them was saying. "We're early if we're lucky, and first if we're right." Edward nodded. His mouth assembled in that shape adults kept for seriousness. He tipped his glass toward the men, toward the idea of money turning into more money, toward the idea that such transformations might absolve the old ones. Across the lawn, Vanessa Mrs. Hammond, at least in the registry office, stood with her spine aligned like a ruler. She wore a dress the color of her ambition and the smile of a woman who had decided a long time ago that if she hit her marks, applause would follow as surely as sunlight. No, it came together easily," she told the circle around her. "Honestly, I love hosting. It's a joy." She held her champagne the way some people hold a prayer book. The party was for Lila in the way wars are for civilians, in name. Lila tried 3 separate times to approach a cluster of children near the dessert table, where pastel macarons sat like obedient planets. Each time, the universe expanded without her. The girls turned, whispered, laughed. A boy stared at his phone as if it were a reflection with better company. The third time, one of the girls stumbled backward deliberately, as though to leave less air for Lila to share. Lila retreated to the shade at the side of the house, where the stone stayed cool even when the sun had opinions. She pressed her cheek against the doll's yarn hair. Her throat had the tight, shiny feeling of tears that didn't know where to go. And then, sensible shoes, the soft percussion of stacked plates, a small shadow falling beside her. "Mind some company?" asked a voice that could fold blankets with sound alone. Lila looked up. The woman was in a dove-gray uniform, the kind that insisted on usefulness. She wore her hair tucked into a scarf, and her hands brown, steady, lightly chapped held a little tray of rhinestoned napkin rings that had been plucked from the grass and reclaimed from their brief lives as confetti. Her name tag was a rectangle that said, M. Ellison. People read only as far as a letter when they didn't need the rest. "I'm on break," the woman said, as if she owed the lawn an explanation. "I brought a magic trick." Lila blinked. A magic trick? The woman, who had introduced herself to herself as Mara 12 hours earlier in the staff break room mirror, just to remember what a name sounded like said out loud, nodded. With the caution of someone approaching a skittish winged thing, she sat on the stone beside Lila. Not on the step above her, not at the edge of the girl's weather, but inside it. From her pocket she drew a tiny pouch the color of robin eggs. She loosened the strings and poured into her palm a constellation of cheap plastic beads. Their colors were small but sincere. "Magic," Mara explained, "because when you don't have much, you learn to turn little pieces into something that can outshine a chandelier." Lila leaned closer. The beads clicked softly. "Can they spell?" she asked after a beat. The question surprised her. It surprised Mara, too. It sounded like hope that had been hiding behind good manners. "These don't," Mara said. "But they can speak." "What do they say?" "Depends on the person wearing them." Mara threaded a length of elastic through the beads in an easy, practiced rhythm, her fingers remembering other little wrists. Another kitchen where the light came in at the wrong angle for a long time. Lila chose colors like decisions she was allowed to make. Purple, red, a single ridiculous green. When the bracelet was full, Mara tied the elastic with a double surgeon's knot and slipped it over Lila's hand. It hung loose and friendly. "It says," Mara announced, with the certainty of someone reading tea leaves she herself had placed, "I am not invisible to everyone." Lila stared at the small circle on her skin as if her wrist had become a lighthouse. Behind his sunglasses, a man in a linen blazer watched the scene and elbowed his wife. "Is that the cleaning lady?" he said, surprised by the appearance of labor at an event powered by it. His wife made a noise that meant yes, and we shall not applaud this. Vanessa's jaw tightened. The photographer behind the peony wall pivoted his lens away on instinct, uninterested in love that didn't make for publication. Mara felt the whispers without turning to collect them. She had worked in enough houses to know a whisper's architecture. But the bracelet glowed quietly on Lila's arm, and Mara had always been susceptible to small forms of light. They would have stayed there, an island of two. If not for gravity, the kind that drags women back to work, and girls back toward other girls who do not yet know the cost of laughter. Lila, newly braced by her bracelet, approached the dessert table again. She lifted her wrist with a shy pride. "It's pretty," she ventured. The closest girl hair parted by parental ambition, dress that matched the napkins on purpose wrinkled her nose. "Did you get it from the trash?" Another girl tittered like a bird that didn't know what else to do. "From the help," the first girl added, having tried on that phrase and finding it fit too well. The bracelet did not grow heavier, but Lila's arm did. She lowered it quickly, as if hiding a bruise. Vanessa, 20 feet away, saw the exchange and took a long sip of champagne that tasted like relief. Correction, she thought. Children corrected each other so efficiently. Adults need only provide the perimeter. Mara busied herself with wiping down the bar tables, but she did it from the same radius as Lila's shadow. She could read sorrow from angles like a nurse reads swelling. She had promised herself, years ago, after all the tidy phrases people said about resilience had given her nothing but blisters, that when a child looked like this, she would enter the circumference. So she did. "Want to make another?" Mara asked, sitting down without a permit, as if the ground had invited her. "You said these don't spell," Lila murmured. The careful way children test a kindness to see whether it has rules. "These don't," Mara agreed. "But I brought some trouble." She opened her palm. Alphabet beads, their edges softened by years of being misaddressed, gleamed like tiny white dice. They picked letters, L and I and L and A. Between each letter, Lila placed a bead the color of ocean glass. When they were finished, the bracelet looked like the practice work of a small goddess learning to name herself. "Now," Mara said when she had tied the knot, "it can speak in 2 languages. 2. What it says to you, and what it says to anyone who thinks they already know the ending." This time when Lila stretched her arm, she did it only for the 2 of them. The sun caught the beads and translated light into grammar. "That's quite enough," said Vanessa brightly, arriving as if on the wing beats of a smile. She crouched, and the dress that had been designed to kneel only in pews resisted. "Mara, isn't it? Could I borrow you? Just a moment?" Mara rose. Lila's grip tightened like a rope thrown in reverse. "She's with me," Lila said, then flushed, not used to hearing the sentence in her own mouth. "Sweetheart," Vanessa cooed, polishing her vowels. "Mara has guests to help." "Do I?" Mara asked gently, turning to Vanessa with a face like weathered oak. "Or do I have things to clean?" "Don't get clever," Vanessa whispered when they had stepped behind a line of topiary. The smile slid off her face like something on a hot plate. "This is a family event, not your craft room. You're confusing her. She's confused because the people who are supposed to see her are using sunglasses as blindfolds," Mara said, almost kindly. "I'm only removing the blindfold for a minute." "If you ruin this for me," Vanessa hissed, lowering her voice to the register of threats that imagine themselves private because they are whispered, "I will." "You will what?" Mara asked, not as challenge but as a real question, the kind grown women ask when they are out of patience for performance. "Fire me from washing plates? I know what that costs. Do you?" "For the record," Vanessa snapped, remembering an audience even when the shrubbery was empty, "your boundaries are appalling." "For the record," Mara said, not stepping closer, not stepping back, "my boundaries are a child." She returned to Lila, and in a party where nothing surprising was supposed to happen, except the predictable arrival of dessert, something irreversible did. The photographer, who had been paid to find narrative where none existed, wandered toward them with a practiced grin. "Birthday girl," he sang, his voice sugared to survive any weather. "Let's get a photo with Mom." Lila stood. She walked to Mara and took her hand. "Take it with my mom," she said, her voice a bell rung on purpose. The photographer glanced at Vanessa by instinct, at Edward by insurance. "Which one is—" "Her," Lila said, her chin naming a direction, her eyes already having named everything. Sound exited the garden through a hidden door. Glasses hung in palms like ornaments the tree had grown bored with. Someone's laugh died mid-air as if its battery had been removed. Edward started forward without knowing whether he would arrive. "Lila," Vanessa said, astonished to discover that her teeth could chatter in sunlight. "That's not appropriate." "It's the truth," Lila replied, the way children sometimes speak with the weight of old women, because no one has left them any other choice. Mara's chest made the slow, angled ache of a person who has run too far and forgotten how to stop. She had not planned for revelation. Revelation had planned for her. "What is this?" Edward asked, though in the space behind his words, the furniture of certain memories shifted, distracting him with the sound of their legs scraping the floor. He remembered a baby with colic that had felt like unsolvable math at 3 a.m. He remembered the smell of baby shampoo on a shoulder that wasn't his. He remembered a soft voice inventing lullabies out of silverware clinks. He remembered relief. "You should have told her," Mara said, not with the relish of someone serving a victory, but the fatigue of someone naming a debt. "Told her what?" Vanessa demanded, as if outrage might purchase a different reality. "That after her mother died," Mara answered, measuring each syllable for weight, "I was hired to care for Lila. That I stayed when the house didn't. That she learned the shape of love from my arms before she had words for it." "That doesn't make you her mother," Vanessa said quickly, a reflex rather than a thought, like pulling a hand back from a stove. "Your staff. You work here." "Let's not pretend," Lila said quietly, and if the garden had possessed a spine, it would have felt a finger running down it. She looked at Vanessa the way one looks at a mirror that has never reflected back anything but a borrowed pose. "You never hold me." It would have been a mercy to leave the sentence there, but mercy was in short supply. Truth, by contrast, had been hoarding. "She called me Mama," Mara said softly to no one and everyone, before she could pronounce her own name. Vanessa's face made and unmade itself. "Edward," she said, "do you hear this?" He did. He was hearing it at last, the way one sometimes hears sirens that have been sounding for minutes. Not because they grow louder, but because one stops insisting the song is something else. He covered his mouth with his hand and looked as if someone had advised him how to pray. "I didn't think," he began, and the sentence was so foolish he stopped it. "I thought if I—" The rest dissolved. The guests watched a man trip over the language men used when they remembered their daughters were not projects, but people. "This is theater," Vanessa announced to the spectators, instinctively angling her body toward the largest audience. "Emotional blackmail. You're all being manipulated. No one applauded. No one booed. The garden, so good at being impressed, decided for once to be still." Edward found a piece of his voice that did not crack. "Enough," he said to Vanessa without thunder. It landed like weather anyway. "Enough. You're siding with her?" Vanessa breathed. And for the first time since the caterers had arrived, she was an unpracticed woman in a complicated dress. Edward did not answer the question. He turned toward Mara and Lila with the blank openness of a man walking into a church out of habit, and realizing the habit had been for this moment all along. "I cannot repair," he said haltingly, "what I allowed to be made. I can only choose differently now." "You're going to wreck our marriage at your daughter's birthday?" Vanessa demanded. A tremor ran through her smile. "For a maid?" "For my daughter," Edward said. The simplicity felt like a plank thrown across black water. "For the person who loved her when I outsourced love and called it survival." Something unclenched in Mara's shoulder blades. She had made herself small for so long, it would take practice to stand inside that space without apologizing for the air she used. She looked at Lila. "I never wanted you to find out like this," she said. "I always knew," Lila answered. And the beads on her wrist, the alphabet still spelling the name that had been a story before it was a sound, caught a piece of sunlight with the confidence of an old truth. The party ended invisibly. People drifted back to their lives with the cautious steps of courtiers leaving a throne room after the crown has fallen. The band packed up without playing an encore. The floral wall drank its own perfume. The cake was sliced in a kitchen where laughter did not travel. When the last car turned down the drive, the silence took a breath and sat down. It had been standing for hours. Change does not arrive the way guests do, with ribbons and a start time. It sneaks into the linen closet and refuses to leave. It rewrites the labels on the pantry jars. It adjusts the thermostat and then hands you the bill. At Ashford House, change left fingerprints everywhere. Vanessa moved her things to a suite at a hotel with an atrium she imagined might substitute for having a life. The attorney she called advised discretion. The friend she called advised war. The mother she called advised a face-saving lie. She tried each in turn. None made a home. Edward met with a man who had not expected to see him so soon. "I'm not here to litigate," Edward said, sitting forward with the posture of a confession. "I'm here because the worst thing that I did to my daughter was hire someone to feel for her and then pretend that feeling had never happened. That is not a legal sentence, the man said gently. No, Edward agreed, but it is the beginning of a father. He apologized to Mara in the study, because that is where men who have spent their lives in rooms with leather chairs go when their words need serious furniture. I can't give you back what I took, he said. You didn't take it, Mara replied. You asked me to make it, and then you tried to store it in the basement. The sentence should have sounded cruel. It didn't. It sounded like a diagnosis. Will you? He began, and stopped, aware of the insult hidden inside the ask. Would you consider? He looked at his hands. Would you consider staying? Not as staff. I don't know how to say this without making it small. Not as anything smaller than you are. As family. Mara held her breath the way one prepares to pick up a hot pan. The truth was that she had never been invited into a home with both hands open. She had been permitted, and she had been necessary, and she had been thanked in the way people thank the ones they ask to build things for which they will later take credit. But she had not been asked to belong. Belonging, she knew, is a verb that turns houses into more than roof and rent. I will stay, Mara said at last, if we are honest about what staying is. It is not simple. The past does not go quiet because we tell it to. She could say it like this now. She had practiced naming complicated things gently. But I will not leave her. I don't want you to, Edward said. And because men sometimes find flight easier than descent, he left the room to cry down the hall where the housekeeper Nora, a woman who had watched each family live the same myth like a play that never closed, pretended not to hear. Love, once it stops being spectacle, turns into logistics. The following weeks refitted themselves with unglamorous shapes. Schedules were drawn on the chalk wall in the pantry, piano lessons in orange, therapy in blue, Tuesday library in green. The seat at the kitchen table where staff had always paused, never sat, became a chair that remembered a wait. On a Saturday morning when the sunlight decided it was safe to enter kitchens again, Lila stood on a step stool and sifted flour into a bowl that had belonged to a woman she could no longer conjure by smell. The flour made clouds on her arms. Mara cracked eggs with one hand. Lila watched the yolks slip like the sun making choices. Do we have to be neat? Lila asked, a dangerous question in a house where neatness had been mistaken for virtue. We have to be honest, Mara said, dropping a handful of chocolate chips into Lila's waiting fingers. The rest is optional. They ate pancakes at the table. Lila had insisted. Sit there, she told Mara, pointing to the chair beside hers with the imperiousness of a queen who has finally thrown the right kind of tantrum. Butter spread across the plate like a small map of a better country. Halfway through her second pancake, Lila slid her hand across the table and put it on top of Mara's. The weight was exact. Now everyone knows, she said. I think, Mara replied, and her smile had the patience of a person who had waited at very long intersections. You always did. Later they planted marigolds in the rectangle of dirt beside the back steps. Lila named them after places she had not yet visited. Paris, she said to one stubborn sprig. Cleveland, she said to a flower that would not obey, and kept leaning toward Mara as if asking for advice. The bracelets clicked on her wrist when she patted soil into place. The letters of her name grew dirt under their edges. The bracelets did not mind. At night, before bed, there were new rituals, some borrowed from older rooms, some made on the spot. Lila would bring her doll, now mended at the shoulder where a seam had given way during a rescue mission under the sofa, into Mara's lap and listen to a story. Sometimes the stories were about girls with maps for hands and courage in their pockets. Sometimes, on nights when the day had been ordinary and kindness had arrived on time, the story was simply the account of a day told in the voice of someone who had not missed it. Edward learned to sit in doorways. This was both literal, he sat in the doorway of Lila's room while she fell asleep, and symbolic. A posture of someone trying to honor the threshold between what he had been and what he hoped to become. He listened, which had once been an afterthought and was now work. He attended recitals where the notes were mostly brave. He did not talk about Texas at dinner unless asked, and then only after he had asked about volcanoes and art class, and whether the boy in the striped sweater was still unkind. Lila said yes. Edward asked his name. Lila said the name. Edward said, "There was a boy like that when I was your age," and told the truth about jealousy and fear, and how sometimes the children with the sharpest tongues had been taught to sharpen them by grown-ups who didn't know how else to feel powerful. It was not smooth. Relearning rarely is. There were days Mara's hands trembled with the muscle memory of a life where her place depended on disappearing. Days she thought to wash a glass she had just drank from, as if traces of her lips might get someone in trouble. Lila would catch her doing it and take the glass and put it in the cabinet on purpose, brash as a clarion. "It lives here," Lila would say, holding the door open so the glass could practice belonging. There were evenings Edward would walk into the kitchen and stop abruptly because the sight, Mara sitting, not standing, Lila leaning against her, not hurrying past, the two of them talking about plants, not doing their best to look as if their lives happened off stage, made his lungs forget the cadence of ordinary breathing. He would go outside, pretend to check the mailbox for the second time that day, and tell the box he didn't deserve this. The mailbox, wise in the way of objects, said nothing, which is what a lot of forgiveness sounds like at first. There were letters from Vanessa, 3 in total, one accusing, one pleading, and one with sentences so long they seemed designed to outrun meaning. The lawyer read them. Edward skimmed them and felt nothing at intervals. Then he felt too much. Lila heard the word custody on the phone and asked if it was a kind of weather. Mara told her, "Only if we choose it." Vanessa, who had thought love was proof of concept, discovered it is in fact a verb with terrible insistence. She dated a man who admired her and left because admiration, not being love, had edges. She went to a spa that promised to rebalance her and left with cucumber water and the same heart. She blamed everyone and everything and then, alone, practiced blaming herself. Neither practice made a home. Once, late in autumn, she came to the gate and pressed the bell with a finger that trembled. Nora answered because Nora believed in reducing harm wherever possible. Vanessa stood straight. "I brought a gift," she said, holding up a box with a ribbon that had cost a lunch. "It's for Lila." Nora ushered her into the foyer with the professional hospitality of a ship's captain who has docked in worse weather. Mara and Lila came down the stairs together. Lila because it was her house. Mara because it was her job to make sure the word house kept being a place, not a performance. Vanessa held out the box, and Lila took it with the solemnity of someone receiving an instrument she is not sure how to play. Inside was a doll so perfect it might have sued the original for copyright. Its hair did not know tangles. Its dress did not know color outside a palette designed by people with magazines. "Thank you," Lila said, because Mara had taught her the kind of manners that protect the person speaking more than the person receiving. She put the doll down on the hall table gently, as one would a bird that had flown into the wrong room. The doll's glass eyes reflected the chandelier and nothing else. "I miss you," Vanessa said, aware that she had chosen a pronoun that made demands. She looked at Mara as if looking at the sun, briefly, and with the ache of someone who has decided light is personal. "I'm learning," she added, a sentence that was truer than the word deserved. "I'm learning what love is." "Learning," Mara said evenly, "happens in kitchens, not in speeches." Vanessa nodded. She had always prided herself on living in the right rooms. "May I?" she began, and then stopped. "I brought a card," she finished lamely, producing an envelope heavy enough to count as an object. Lila took it. It said, "To a special girl" on the front. Inside, in Vanessa's careful handwriting, it said, "I don't know how to do this. I am trying. I hope you are happy." Underneath that, in smaller letters, as if afraid, she had written, "I am sorry for the pictures." "Thank you," Lila said again, and when she looked up, she did not look away fast. She let Vanessa see her. It wasn't forgiveness. It was eyesight. Sometimes those are the same eventually. After Vanessa left, Lila took the doll to the kitchen and asked for a needle and thread. Mara threaded the needle with an efficiency born of years in rooms where stitchery was an act of insurrection. Lila sewed a small, crooked heart onto the doll's dress, a red patch of imperfection that belonged to their house. "Now it knows something," she said, happier with the flaw than she'd been with perfection. "Now it has a story." Winter taught the house new sounds. Radiators sighed with the effort of generosity. Windows complained about drafts. Lila learned to make cocoa without burning the milk and to stir chili with patience. Mara bought a plant she did not know the name of and spent 3 weeks calling it different possible names until it answered to joy by sprouting a leaf on the day Lila had a fever and asked if anyone would sit in the bathroom with her while she took a bath because the world felt too big. They sat with her Mara on the rug, Edward on the closed toilet lid, and told stories about their worst colds and their bravest small acts. "Once," Edward admitted, "I asked for help from a colleague and I thought it would kill me." "And then it didn't," Lila giggled weakly. "That's not a cold," she said. "It was," he protested, "the kind grown-ups get." We hide the thermometer. Lila's fever broke after midnight. The house sighed again, as if exhaling an old breath. Mara smoothed Lila's hair back the way she had when the child was a baby, and the future had been a corridor without doors. Now the corridor had doors. Some were closed and some were open and some had to be built. That was fine. She knew a carpenter. The bracelets never left Lila's wrist. The elastic loosened once and snapped, and the beads rolled under the couch toward a little city of dust and lost paper clips. Lila got on her knees, reached far under, came up with a handful of alphabet and color, and rebuilt the circle in a configuration that included a new bead shaped like a star. "To remember the day," she said, though they were doing a different remembering now, one made of pancakes and plants and baths and the hallway where Edward sat at bedtime and told the truth about his day when he could. The bracelets clicked together sometimes when Lila ran, and the sound was a kind of music. It said, "Here is a girl whose name has been rescued from silence." On a Sunday morning when the sun came late and the house decided to forgive it, Mara poured batter on the griddle and Lila flipped the pancakes with a flourish that could have broken something if it had been poorly timed. "Rule," Lila declared, patting the chair beside her as if inaugurating a throne. "You sit here." "Am I allowed to be a queen at your table?" Mara teased. "You're the kitchen queen," Lila said with complete certainty. Also, the bracelet maker. Also, my mom. She said the last three words with the casual power of someone setting a glass of water down within reach. Mara did not reach for a tissue. She breathed. She had learned not to apologize for the way gratitude makes eyes shine. Then, she said, as queen, I declare syrup legal. They ate. Butter pooled. A bird argued with its reflection in the window. When the plates held only crumbs and decisions, Lila slid her hand across the table again, the same exact path her palm had drawn weeks ago, and placed it on Mara's. Now everyone knows, she said, and they laughed at the repetition because it freed them from the gravity of beginnings. I always did, Mara answered. Through the doorway, Edward watched them and understood that sometimes you are blessed not with a second chance, but with a first one late enough to feel miraculous. He did not clap. He did not say grace. He just stood there, an ordinary man learning to be a father in a kitchen where love had quit her catering job and joined the family. Outside, the marigolds, brittle in the cold, held their bright little flags anyway. The garden would riot in spring. The floral wall, long since compost, had become a dark earth that would feed the roses as if contrition could be a fertilizer. The house, which had once been a stage, consented at last to be a home. And in that home, a girl with 2 bracelets and a doll with a crooked heart learned the oldest lesson: that love is not an event, but a practice, not a set piece, but a table, not a costume, but a skin. Some stories end with applause. The best ones end with dishes to do and someone humming while they're done. In the end, the garden taught us something simple and hard. Family isn't a title. It's the hand that reaches for you every ordinary day. Love is not a speech or a photo. It's pancakes on a Sunday, a chair pulled out at the table, a name spelled bead by bead. When truth finally speaks, appearances fall away, and what remains is the person who stayed. If you've ever been the one who wasn't seen, or the one who chose to see this story is yours too. Tell us, who showed up for you when it mattered? And who will you show up for this week? Share your moments below. Your words might be the light someone needs. If this touched you, please comment, subscribe, and stay with us for more true, hopeful stories.